Yashakoak. Okay. Yashakoak, everyone. You can all have a seat. I have the pleasure of introducing the person giving today's message. So I'm just going to quote a little bit from our earlier reading in Davarim in verse 13, when Moshe mentions how he chose well-respected men from each tribe who are known for their wisdom and understanding. Today's speaker is not a man. She comes from out of state. And this one I stole from Ralph, but she's the first lady of Ruach Israel. She cooks, she teaches Shabbat school, and she sings like an angel straight from the tribe of Labell. I want to recommend Rebekah. Yay. And let's give Rebekah our best attention. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to what you have to say. Shabbat Shalom.
This is new to me. Am I in? Do I sound good? Okay, great. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Stacy. This is new. That's been the story of this summer for me. The Lord has presented me with opportunities to do some new things, or some things I haven't done for a very long time. Maybe it's just that I'm getting older, or maybe it's the times that we're living in, but I've experienced some unusual fear around getting out there, altering my routine, doing new things. I had to think about how to start this first story that I want to share with you. I'm a music teacher. I teach people to play piano. I teach them to sing. I've been doing that for some time. One of the new things the Lord has brought into my life recently is being able to participate in worship at Ruach, again, as a singer. I got a gig last month. I played piano for a memorial service on July 8th. I used to be a church musician. I haven't done that in a very long time. It was a wonderful experience with a musical family who planned the music beautifully. They compensated me well, but it was something I hadn't done in quite a while. And God was reminding me how much I love making music for Him. All three of my kids went away to camp for a full week this summer. This was new for me. My husband and I had a week at home with no kids. And I was reminded how much I like him. We homeschool. There are a lot of new things this summer with a senior in high school that we're heading into. College, options for after school. I tutor her senior year group. We're doing physics. I didn't take physics. God is reminding me how much I love to learn. I was contacted last week by a new mom who's trying to nurse her baby. I haven't volunteered for La Leche League breastfeeding support for moms in over 5 years. This was new. I spoke to this mom. I helped her as best I could. God was reminding me how much I love supporting new mothers. So I shouldn't have been surprised when Rabbi Nathan reached out to me a few weeks ago, inviting me to speak this week while so many are away at the conference. But I was surprised, and I had some moments of self-doubt while preparing for today. But God is good, and He has graciously reminded me that I really do love to speak, and I love to tell a story. So that's my story as I'm presenting it to you today, but if you'd asked me a week ago, it would have been a different story. It might have been a more negative story, a story of stress, a story of angst. If you'd asked me on July 5th how I was feeling about playing the memorial service on July 8th, it would have been the same story. I had to wait to tell the story with some prayer and some patience until I could frame the story within God's grace. Then I have a story to tell that's helpful to others. I have another story to tell. I got to know another theater mom over the past few years. She's a real go-getter, a nonprofit development officer. I made her a salad for some reason. And when she called to say that the lid to the container had broken, I said, no problem. I used to be a pampered chef consultant, and I probably got it for free. Don't worry about it. And then a few weeks later, she was looking for a voice teacher for her daughter. And I said, oh, I'm a voice teacher. I've taught music lessons for a long time. And now she's one of my students, her daughter. She posted on her Facebook page that she was going to become a doula. She was going to help moms give birth. And I said, oh, I used to do that. It was a lot of fun. You'll have a great time. And she starts to look at me like, who are you? And then we're having coffee, and she's talking about a challenge in her nonprofit. And I said, you know, when I used to manage symphony orchestras in the Boston area, and she looks at me and says, you have a very interesting work history. And I had never thought about it that way. To me, it was this meandering path that didn't make a lot of sense. So sometime after that, I was driving in my car, and I like to talk to myself. I hear it's a sign of intelligence. But I was driving, and I just started recanting the last 30 years. I graduated from college at the time about 30 years before, and I was like, what is this interesting work history? And I just started telling myself my story of every job I'd had, every vocation I'd been called to. And you know what? It was an unbelievable story. And God's hand was present in every change of career, every job. I could not have orchestrated this seemingly bizarre, meandering story, but the Lord did. And when I looked back on it and reflected over 30 years, I saw that. And what that did for me is it gave me a place from which to move forward in confidence that whatever came next, He had His hand in as well. It cemented my faith. It was a moment sitting in the car talking to myself when I realized how in control of my destiny my Heavenly Father is. So Rabbi Rich said it's good to have a point when you're giving a drash. And Rabbi Nathan called it the big idea. And so my idea is the idea of telling stories, in case you can't tell. Why do we need stories? How should we tell our stories? What stories do we tell? In our Torah portion today, we begin the book of Davarim. I've always loved the book of Davarim. I think it's because we hear Moses' voice. It's the last month of his life, and we get to hear him speak. The man who in Exodus said, I'm not eloquent. The man who said, I am slow of speech, and I am slow of tongue. His last book is called Words, Davarim. And he speaks words of encouragement, words of remembrance, words of remonstrance, words of conviction to Israel. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, says that it isn't because Moses developed better rhetorical skills that he spoke so many words in the book of Davarim. That's not the reason the book is so effective. It's that his passion for the message and his love for God were so great that he had to say these things. He had grown beyond himself in his perceived lack of ability. I hear this calm, urgent passion in Moses' voice. So he gathers the Israelites and he says, you're here, we're here. You're about to finally step into the promised land. I'm handing over the reins to Joshua. I can't go with you. I'm going to go be with God. But before this happens, settle in, kids, it's story time. And he proceeds to recount instances in the past of God's commands and their responses and the consequences of their choices, the consequences of his own choices. He proceeds to tell them their story. It's interesting to think about how Moses tells the story. Our passage today ended as Moses was beginning to retell a particular story that you may recognize from when we first encounter the story in Exodus. Moses says, choose for yourselves wise and discerning men, well known to your tribes, and I will appoint them as your heads. So I took the heads of your tribes and appointed them as heads over you. Skipping a little bit, I commanded your judges at that time, saying, hear cases between your brothers, judge fairly. I commanded you at that time everything you should do. Do you remember this story? There was another person who was central to the story back in Exodus. It was Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. This was all Jethro's idea. Jethro came to Moses and said, son-in-law, you're having trouble. You're having trouble governing. There's too much for you to do. You need to divvy it up. You need to delegate, and you need to take just the top cases. But when Moses retells the story in Deuteronomy, he doesn't give credit to Jethro. He owns the choice because he made the choice. He's taking responsibility. Now, that was a good choice. It was a good choice for him to own. It was successful. That mode of leadership arguably is the foundation for how our family, our country was founded. It's okay that he didn't give credit to Jethro. Humility is owning what you've done for good and for bad. Moses did that, but I found that interesting. And I think we could go back from Deuteronomy to when these stories were told and have an interesting comparison of how Moses told the story and what really happened. The best stories are the ones that we own as our own. We're a homeschooling family. We homeschool with a Christian classical curriculum, and we're getting ready to start a new school year. We get a guide, it's a curriculum guide, and it's organized at the first, we have the why, and then we have the what, and then we have the how, for how we're gonna do our education for the year. And the first part is the why. And as I was reading this, I thought, ooh, Moses is giving them their why, because he's going to move on in the book of Davarim to tell them what to do, how to live when they go into the promised land. And I thought this was a brilliant thought, quite frankly, and I was really excited that I had something original to say to you. And then I went to Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and I read this. Through the addresses we read in the book of Devarim, Moses gave the people their why. So he said it, it's not my thought originally, but here's the why. They are God's people, the nation on whom he has set their love, the people he rescued from slavery and gave in the form of commandments the Constitution of liberty. They may be small, but they are unique. They are the people who in themselves testify to something beyond themselves. They are the people whose fate will defy the normal laws of history. Other nations, says Moses, will recognize the miraculous nature of the Jewish story. This is motivation. Remember that many of these people that Moses was speaking to, it's a new generation. They hadn't experienced all the miracles. It was history to them. They needed to hear it again to know how to start a new life in the promised land. Why did Moses tell this story? So that they understood the why for keeping and honoring their covenant with their God. We tell our stories so that we can move forward. We study history and we remember. We take responsibility and we strive to do better. Right before the COVID-19 situation happened, we had a wonderful celebration of 40 years here at Ruach Israel. Many of you were there. You'll remember. We shared stories. A stalwart group of messianic leaders, our modern day Moseses, if you will, gathered to bless our community with stories of the past and stories of God's blessing on this place. And at that time, Evan and I were approaching our 20th anniversary here at Ruach Israel. We first walked in the doors in June of 2000, 22 years ago. I have many stories of my journey here at Ruach Israel. If I were to make a coffee table book of my stories, it would have a lot of pictures in them. So rather than go through the entire coffee table book with you, I'd like you to just imagine some of the illustrations that would be in my book. Maybe you're in those illustrations. Just a little background, Evan and I were married in 1999. I was a church-going Christian, and he was a non-believing, high holiday Jew, raised conservative, but not really practicing. I got his okay for that description. He's not here to defend himself. And we had an agreement that he would go to church with me every 3 weeks. That was arbitrary, but that was what it was. We took our chances. Underneath the picture of our wedding, it would probably say, "Don't try this at home." Kids, don't try this at home. I felt God's hand in our marriage. That's a story I can share with you another time. I always have. But one of the Sundays when I was attending church, I met a couple from Ruach Israel who were there because our church was celebrating Sukkot. I didn't know it was Sukkot. They called it the Festival of Booths, and it was a bunch of tables in the undercroft of the church where every ministry that church supported was able to come and show the members what their ministries were all about. And this couple from this congregation had a ministry. And I saw them and I realized who they were, and I introduced myself and said, "I'm Rebekah. I've been married for 2 months to a Jewish husband." And they said, "Well, we don't want to steal you from your church, but there is this place in Needham called Ruach Israel." And that was in October of '99. It took us until June to figure out how to go somewhere on a Saturday morning, and we arrived here then. We were hooked by the high holidays. The next picture of our first visit would probably have a picture of Rabbi Rich, younger than I am now, in a tallis, and probably Mr. David Nardoni, up here canting, would be in that picture of the first time that we visited. We started attending regularly. Here at Ruach Israel, we were not unequally yoked. I got a very clear message from my Heavenly Father, which was, "I'll take your husband's salvation issue from here. You just pray. And I have things to teach you too, by the way. I have things to teach you about my covenant with Israel. I have things to teach you about Torah. You can learn some Hebrew. You could learn how to really pray. You can learn how to really worship. You can learn who I am and that I am still the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." In my coffee table book, there would be a picture of L'Zikroni, our ceremony of remembrance. And in that picture, I might have tears in my eyes as I'm taking part and my husband is not, because he's not a believer and I want him to be so badly. There might be a picture of the astonished look on my face about 20 years ago when I entered the congregation and this place was in turmoil. When a coup of sorts wanted Rabbi Rich out, and the entire governance of this congregation had to be redone. It was an amazing time. And there might be a picture of me at home saying to my husband, "Should we continue? There's a lot of drama there." And my husband saying, "Absolutely, we're staying." There would certainly be a picture of the gigantic baby shower that took place in there in 2004 when I was expecting Miss Simone over here. Because you see, when I was expecting Simone, there were not a million babies in this congregation. It was novel that there was a pregnant woman having a baby, and the whole congregation came together to give me a shower. We can't do that anymore. There would be a 2-page spread of the day that Evan became a believer in Yeshua, almost 5 years after we started attending here. And when we were finally able to become members, full members of this congregation. That's his story. I won't tell it. You know, gossip is telling someone else's story. We're not supposed to tell other people's stories. We tell our own. There would be pictures of the Nickel kids. We knew them before they were married. It was legendary when Dave was coming home, and Rabbi Rich talked about that. There would certainly be a picture of Annette Salinger in the 20 years of her being in the kitchen. And of course, there would be a picture of Stacy hugging someone, probably me. There might be a story about when I decided whether I would convert, when the conversion process was new, and I decided ultimately, you know what, no, I am a blessed Gentile woman who gets to serve my family, even if my kids now tease me and call me a goy. And now I continue to be amazed at this community. I am amazed today that when our leaders are gone, the Ruach is so present that some of us can step in and do things we've never done before and still continue to honor God and honor Shabbat. I am amazed at the book club, The Abolition of Man, that I've been able to take part in a few times. We have some smart people in this community, people who know how to think and how to feel, as Rabbi Rich talks about. I walked in this door with one goal. I wanted my husband to be a believer. I wanted us to be unified as husband and wife spiritually. But God's plan was so much bigger. The story was so much bigger. I am a part of this place with 2 children bat mitzvah and a bar mitzvah coming up June 17th, 2023, mark the date. Why do we need story? Like the Israelites, we need to know how to move forward. Stratford Caldecott, who directed the Center for Faith and Culture in Oxford at the Thomas More College, came to faith after studying the stories of Tolkien and Lewis. And he said, to be enchanted by story is to be granted a deeper insight into reality. Stories, fairy tales even, help us understand what's happening now. I would maintain that we need to hear them. Thank you for hearing my stories, but we also need to be able to tell them. One of the greatest gifts we can give each other is to hear and tell our stories, stories framed in God's grace. We lost a friend this week. Our friend Cheryl lost her husband, Jerry. Knowing Cheryl, I know that one of the best things we can do for this new widow in our midst is to hear her stories. Take the time to listen to them and to share our own. Mine will involve Stevie Wonder blasting in the car with Jerry sitting next to me. Just a thought. I'm going to let Cheryl know about that one. Which stories do we tell? As I mentioned, we want to tell true stories, and we want to tell our own stories. I'm challenging myself to refrain from telling stories until they are framed with God's grace. See, all of our stories lie within a bigger story. There's a hymn that's a favorite of mine, and I'd like to share it because I am a Gentile after all. It's a hymn called I Will Sing the Wondrous Story. And it goes like this, with a few adjustments for our Jewish context. I will sing the wondrous story of Mashiach who died for me, how he left his home in glory for the execution stake of Golgotha. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of Mashiach who died for me. Sing it with the Kedoshim in glory, gathered by the crystal sea. Days of sorrow still possess me, sadness' path I often tread. But Yeshua still is with me, by his hand I'm simply led. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Mashiach who died for me. Sing it with the saints, Kedoshim, in glory, gathered by the crystal sea. See, when we go to the Olam Haba, we're going to tell stories. And we're really going to be telling one story. In the Amidah, we say, in every generation we will recount your greatness. For all eternity, we will acknowledge your holiness. We will tell the story of his holiness. And we will tell the story of what Yeshua did for us. The big story is the one God wants you to share. how he has guided and blessed you and revealed himself to you. I look forward to hearing yours. Thank you for hearing mine. Shabbat Shalom.
Rebekah, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Not only is she so well-spoken, but every word she said so meaningful and so true. I can't wait to go home and play back the recording when it comes back, so I can think about these things that she talked about, the power of story. And Rebekah, if you don't mind me mentioning, I remember one time you took me out years ago when in my heart I had a story about wanting to be part of the fire service, and you took me to a little restaurant in Malden, and you sat and you listened to every desire of my heart. You prayed with me that it would come to pass, and it did. And that was just so meaningful for me. And all these stories that you talked about, I've been here through probably all of them, and it was so meaningful. I'm sure a lot of you have as well. So thank you so much for your words today. Yasha Koach.
Yasha Koach.
All right. So.